Welcome to Counterpoints, everyone. It's been an extremely busy 24 hours for breaking news, so shout out to our team for being so adapting so easily
Very
to
nimble.
this wild news cycle.
Nimble,
Yeah, absolutely.
nimble producers.
Nimble. How are you doing, Ryan?
Well, Kanye is just blowing everything up, huh?
Kanye's blowing everything up.
We're actually going to talk about Kanye.
We are. We're going to get to Kanye. We're going to get to the Georgia runoff. We're going to talk a little bit about Disney. We're covering all kinds of things on today's show. The Oath Keepers.
We've got some Afghanistan news later in the show.
That's right. We'll have a guest on the Afghanistan news, somebody with very direct knowledge of the negotiations over there. But let's start with the rail strike. Huge news on this front, breaking in the afternoon on Thursday when the Senate actually voted on the negotiation that Crystal and Saagar have been covering very closely, along with Max and other good folks. But we want to start actually with Assad. So we're going to play the video right now. Here's A1, and we'll react to it.
On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 43, under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption. For the adoption of this concurrent resolution, the concurrent resolution is not agreed to.
So that needed 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. That was to include 7 days of paid sick leave in the contract that they're forcing on the workers and the companies through the Railway Labor Act.
It's the Bernie Sanders amendment to the negotiation that Joe Biden punted to Congress in accordance with the Rail Act of, 1923?
Right. It's because you had 50 years of labor disputes on railways that led to basically wars, which were always crushed violently by the federal government. Never leading throughout the 1860s and 70s to any significant gains for unions. It was just absolute nightmare. The federal troops, local cops, a vicious campaign of suppression. But it didn't stop workers from continuing to organize and push for their rights. And so eventually, in the 1920s, they passed this Railway Labor Act, which says that if the bosses won't agree to a contract, the president and Congress can come in and implement it. Thing I learned today is that actually it was written by union lawyers back in the 20s. Like this was actually written as a union-friendly law, but today it operates as a stick that the companies can use against the bargaining of the workers to say, look, here's what we're going to offer, and if you don't like it, we're just going to have the president and Congress, basically put whatever deal, force whatever deal we can down your throats. Now, so what the unions have done is they try to get close to President Biden, and they thought, okay, well, Biden's our man, Lunch Pail Joe. He's gonna be the one who's gonna actually force a better deal on us and on them, because it's a forcing, but it can go either way. That didn't quite work. Biden made their deal a little bit better. He gave them one paid personal day, which bizarrely, wildly, was a red line for these railroad companies. They did not want to give a single day because their whole, and we've talked to Max Alvarez a lot about this, their entire business strategy relies on bringing down the number of staff on a train to as little as humanly possible. So therefore,
it's called PSR.
Yeah, if somebody calls out, their entire national system falls apart.
It's a strategy that has them at literal record profits. And they, on the one hand, want to say that the record profits have nothing to do with labor, they're just about our investments. But on the other hand, they have cut something like 30% of rail workers in recent years in order to optimize the how much weight, carry more freight with fewer employees and fewer cars. So it's explicitly part of a strategy that makes it more vulnerable to, if somebody has to call out sick, they actually require you to use a vacation day, and you have to know 30 days in advance.
Right, you're going to be sick.
Right. So if you make a doctor's appointment, you have to plan it for one of your days off. Or you have to, if you get down to something, you get really sick, you have to plan it for a vacation. It obviously doesn't make any sense. A lot of workers said it contributed to the spread of COVID on the rail because people were not calling out sick because you can't plan to get COVID. Right. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. But that's why when they have record profits, they've been happy, for instance, to agree to these pay raises. I think the pay raises are still sort of unreasonably meager. 24% over 5 years in an environment with high inflation isn't very meaningful. But their red line is the paid sick days, because while they can funnel their profits down to employees, what they don't want to do is have to hire more people, because that's where the costs are really going to go back up.
Right, and so there are a whole bunch of interesting political dynamics to sort through here. Let's start with this: that actually the fight is not over, and this is some breaking news we can bring to exclusive to Counterpoints. That a union source tells me that the next phase of this fight for them is going to be to pressure the Biden administration to include railroad workers in the upcoming executive order that requires that federal contractors pay $15 an hour, all these different things, that requires paid sick leave. So it would require 56 hours of paid sick leave, which would be 7-8-hour shifts. In 2015, believe this or not, when Barack Obama implemented this paid sick leave for federal contractors, they specifically cut railroad workers out of it because of this system, and because of the way that the railroad companies, have their fangs into both parties. And so what they're now pushing the Biden administration to do is to roll that back, say no exception anymore for railroad workers. That brings us to the question of the strategy over the last few days, because I think learning that actually illuminates a little bit why they went for the fight that they did. And so what have you seen about, like, what are you curious about how this has unfolded on the Hill?
Yeah, it's been interesting because it ended up only getting final vote was 52 to 43. One of the first Republican senators, probably the first Republican senator to come out against Biden's negotiation that punted the bill to Congress was Senator Marco Rubio. He ultimately was followed by Ted Cruz, who said the complaints of the...
Yeah, let's put
yeah, there you can see it right there.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a tweet from More Perfect Union. That says all Democrats voted yes except Manchin. All Republicans voted no except for 6. So you had Mike Braun of Indiana, Ted Cruz of Texas, who said that the union demands were, quote, quite reasonable. Lindsey Graham, Josh Hawley, John Kennedy, and Marco Rubio himself all voted with the Democrats on this, but that still leaves 8 votes short. 5 senators did not vote.
3 Democrats.
3 Democrats.
So leaving 5 short.
It was Warnock, Chris Murphy, and someone else.
Yeah.
But
they're all yes votes.
That's what happens. Yeah, that's not entirely unusual. If they know a vote isn't going to pass, they just don't necessarily break away from what they're doing to come in and vote on it. But it's interesting. No Republicans voted for this in the House, I believe.
3, I think, actually.
3, yeah, it was 3. But
they're probably all outgoing.
Yeah, it was a small. It wasn't like there was no significant Republican coalition.
More
like
support in the Senate
side.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is super interesting. Marco Rubio kind of couched it in free market language, which is also interesting to me too, because he hasn't been afraid. In the
How did he pull that off?
Well, it was interesting. I actually can pull up the press release, but what's interesting to me is that you have a lot of employees who have quit working in these conditions. Like, they have just walked out and quit. And what's happening is Congress, because of the act from the 1920s, is protecting the large rail conglomerates. It's basically protecting their monopoly power and protecting them against the forces of the free market by allowing
free
Congress,
labor market, yeah, okay.
Exactly, by allowing Congress to step in. And I don't know if that's the argument that Rubio was going for, but from my perspective, there are a lot of senators who I think really should have gone for this bill. So here's what Marco Rubio said. By now, everyone should realize nothing good happens when Congress gets involved in issues best left to the private sector. So his argument against it was that this is Congress overstepping the boundaries of the private sector to negotiate between the companies and the unions.
Right. And so let's put up A3 also, speaking of Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz,
you can see on the screen here if you're watching.
It's pretty hard to see, but basically what you're going to see is Ted Cruz wander up to where Bernie Sanders is sitting at the very top, and then end up giving him a fist bump
after voting yes.
After voting yes to go with the workers. So you've got Cruz and the Democratic Socialists,
solidarity,
being all buddy together.
No, but that's the only way to look at that, I think, truly is glass half full. Because 10 years ago, this vote is totally different. Maybe you get Lindsey Graham, maybe you get John Kennedy or something like that, although unlikely. But the only way to look at that, I don't mean in general the negotiations for the workers. I mean the fact that where this vote ended up falling, that's a glass half full, that you are able to peel off that many Republicans, and that's a low bar. I understand that's a low bar. And the Republican Party, there's an open question as to whether there's durability to this trajectory. They keep going in this direction. So if this vote were to happen 10 years from now, do you have 6 Republicans or 10 Republicans? Do you have 20 Republicans? I don't know. But at least by the standards of somebody like Saagar or myself that's on the sidelines and has that vantage point, that is an improvement from the low baseline that the Republicans have been at in the past.
And having 52 votes in the Senate, that means you have a bipartisan majority. You got 6 Republicans and a bunch of Democrats. That gives them actual real momentum when they now go to the White House. And I think that what I was saying earlier, I think that illuminates the strategy. And it also puts kind of the Progressive Caucus and the Squad's kind of decision-making around strategy over the last few days in a different light. And we'll see how successful they are to get Biden. But they certainly have raised attention on this issue and have shown that there's bipartisan support for it. So not to dwell too long on the Squad here, but every issue in the House now immediately online becomes a question of, did the Squad sell out or not? And so the immediate answer is almost from everybody is almost yes. And so look, in this case, I don't think that they did. So on Monday, and I know that people, it's a lot easier to just lie and be like, yeah, the Squad's a bunch of sellouts.
Yeah.
But here are the facts of what happened here. So on Monday, after Biden says, we're going to force this deal on the workers, Pelosi tells her caucus, we're going to force this deal on the workers. There will be no changes allowed. We're just going to vote on it. And she had endless votes for this thing. I think she ended up getting 290 votes. It wasn't close because you have so many Republicans who are like, yeah, I'm fine averting this strike. I'm not going to get blamed for this economic catastrophe, and I don't care about these workers. So fair. So there then becomes a public push by Jamal Bowman to say, if we're going to vote on this, let's at least add 7 sick days to it. And there becomes enough pressure that in negotiations, Pelosi says, okay, if everybody agrees to vote for this, then I'll allow it. But I'm going to put up 2 votes. So the 1 vote on the tentative agreement, the 2nd vote on the 7 sick days. What that means is that they both go together over to the Senate, and then if the Senate rejects the 7 sick days, they can still pass the original one and send it off to Biden. Otherwise, they would have to just basically pass the tentative agreement back to the House, and then the House passes it. But that's the flaw in believing that the Squad had leverage here. They passed it with 80 votes today. The Senate did. So the Senate could then just send it back to the House. And if the Squad votes no, it still passes with 285 votes in the House. So you don't have any leverage other than public pressure. So they brought shame and they brought public pressure. So they win the vote in the House.
Knowing the symbolism would be what was important.
So they win the vote in the House.
Doomed bill.
Then it goes over to the Senate, and there's a day or two of debating. And then you hear from Hawley, you hear from Rubio, Ted Cruz votes, and then it fails, and then the unions say, look how much support we have over here. Now we want Biden to add us into this executive order. It'd be pretty impressive negotiating actually if they wind up with all of the raises and also the sick days. Because if you were going to get the sick days, they'd say, well, that's coming out of your raises. So if they wind up with both, that'd be awfully interesting.
Some senators got interested in the last minute in this idea of passing a bill that would kick the can down the road for another 60 or 90 days for a quote cooling down period, something like that would allow the unions to continue negotiating with the companies, with President Biden and Marty Walsh. Obviously, all Democrats and Republicans sort of rejected that for what we have by this vote at the end of the day. But it's interesting to see how, basically, if Ted Cruz is saying that the demands are, quote, quite reasonable, this should be something that gets the vote of not just every Democrat, but every Republican as well. And Republicans are sort of saying we shouldn't have Congress butting in to these negotiations. That's a fig leaf. There are some people maybe who believe that sincerely, that this is the business of, they maybe disagree with the original act, that this should be the business of the negotiators, that Congress shouldn't step in. But at the end of the day, this is people who are worked like dogs asking for paid sick leave. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah, and Ted Cruz is somebody who, knows which way the political winds are blowing, right? Like,
Yeah.
so for him to sense, I want to be on the side of the workers here, suggests that at least there is that energy on the Republican side that people feel like there's some benefit there.
No, and I mean, he's also somebody who's generally been a proponent of I'm sure he's taken lots and lots of corporate money, just like Lindsey Graham has, just like Mike Braun has. I'm sure just like John Kennedy has, and they're saying it's in my interest politically,
Right,
or
exactly,
because maybe they sincerely believe this. They're saying it's in my interest to take this vote, and the fact that again, like I think it's a sign of progress and a good direction for the Republican Party, but it is pitiful that you can only get 6 Republicans in the Senate on a vote like this, when they'll gladly vote for crony subsidies. They'll do that all day. But this, no, Congress shouldn't be involved.
And I guess the last point I'd make on the squad side is, for people who think that the squad made a mistake in promising to vote yes on the tentative agreement in order to get the 7-day sick vote, like, would the unions, and by the way, the unions were pushing for that strategy. That was the strategy that they wanted at the last minute. That wasn't, because Biden forced their hand. They're like, well, okay, this is the best we can do at this moment. So if they didn't do that, if they said, no, unions, I don't think that this is the right play, we're actually just going to vote no. We're not going to force. It's against our principles to force an agreement on a union, so we're voting no, and we're not going to put the 7-day sick leave bill up for a vote, because that would sully our conscience, because that makes us complicit in breaking this strike, in forcing a contract on workers who've rejected it. So if they don't do that, then this week it just cruises through.
Right.
285 votes in the House, 80 votes in the Senate. It goes to the White House. He signs it. Strike is averted, and then the union comes to Biden and says, "Hey, we want to be, we want to be written into this executive order." It's like, well, where's your momentum here? Where's the fight? Like, why do you have capital at this moment that we're going to spend on you? And I think that they built up capital through this week. That has I think substantially increased their chances of getting into this executive order.
And if Joe Biden pushed really, 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 really hard for paid sick leave, the companies would have to take an L on it.
Yeah.
They absolutely would have to take an L.
Write it in the executive order. And then the Supreme Court could say that they can't do it, but they've already said that the other executive order is legit, so.
Yeah, if they wanted
luck
to
with
push
that.
on this, it's not, the ball is in their court. The ball is in the court of Joe Biden and the government negotiators in this case. It's not in the court of the companies, because they don't want to go into a strike situation. They don't want to go into a shutdown situation at all.
Yeah. No, they don't at all.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.